I am very happy to be here, and we are going to talk about decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. Actually, I'll go to what we're going to talk about here. I will give you a big picture why we're here to talk about the first person project and proof of personhood as the single hardest problem in what Dinwei talked about, how we're going to actually have identity not just for people but for their agents. And I'm going to talk about the two types of credentials that we need to do that, personhood credentials and what we call verifiable relationship credentials, and why we need zero knowledge proofs for privacy protection. And then finally, I'll get to the topic, what does that all mean for actually authentication delegation to your personal AI agents, the person side of the agentic web. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to start out just explaining what are we doing with the first person project, where did it come from? It actually originated with work I was doing at the time at Gen Digital, which is one of the world's largest consumer cyber safety companies, and 4 different Linux Foundation projects, LF Decentralized Trust, and its child project Trust over IP, and also the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and the OpenWallet Foundation, because wallets plays a key point in this. And we've been working, of course, on at Trust TRQP for 5 years now on decentralized trust and the architecture you need both on technology and governance for decentralized trust. But what happened was, as Gen AI took off, suddenly this problem of proof of rose to the fore, and different approaches we'll talk about that take either a proprietary approach or use global biometric databases appear to be a very scary solutions. And so we said, hey, we think there's a different way to tackle the the problem. So just to be very clear, proof of personhood, how do you prove you're a real person online in a way that an AI or anything else cannot do? But there's a second aspect to the project that has become just as important, and that's the reason I'm here today, which is we believe the same solution that we're developing for doing that can solve that problem of how a personal AI agent can prove it's representing you, and you can have control over that agent in a very strong cryptographic way. So let's dive into it. Again, as I've said, the number one reason that this has become so important and the first person project came together as this coalition is because of Gen AI's ability now to impersonate people, right? And content, right? Deepfake. You've heard about it throughout this conference. It's a constant theme with Gen AI. When I was at Gen is best known as a cybersecurity company for its antivirus and privacy protection projects. There was just story after story coming out about how now your voice, your face, video, if you haven't seen the latest developments in Google's VO, it's stunning. You will look at that and realize you can never again believe your eyes as to whether something is real online. So this hit home in particular right where we were working on the standards and the open source for decentralized trust, right at the Linux Foundation. Let's see, it was October of last year. LF Decentralized Trust Executive Director Jim Zemlin told this story of what was almost the worst malware ejection attack ever. It's called the XZ attack. This is a picture of the Wired article story about the XZ attack. If you want to read it, it's like a mystery. It was 18 months of slowly building up trust with a single maintainer project until that maintainer got sick, turned the maintainer rights over, and they very cleverly stuck in malware that, had it not been detected by a very assiduous Microsoft engineer testing that distribution, would have become the worst malware attack. There would have been millions of servers around the internet that had this backdoor that only the bad guys could use. So Jim challenged the members of LF Decentralized Trust. He said, we need decentralized trust in our own open source supply chains at the Linux Foundation, right? And we need all of our projects to be able to use it. It needs to be an open standard. We need to develop it with open source. Well, of course, that's what we members of LF Decentralized Trust have been working on. So shortly after, we went and we told Jim about the first person project, and he got very excited about it. And within 2 months, he said, yes, this is great. We want you to start with the Linux kernel project. And we're like, what? You want us to start with the most valuable open source project in the world? He said, yeah, they need trust the worst. They do key signing today. I'll talk more about that. It's awkward, it's slow, and we want you to automate the process. So let's be clear. Let's start with proof of personhood. What exactly are we after there, okay? And I've already told you what it is. The challenge is, how do you solve it without using a global biometric database? In other words, without using one of those. How many folks recognize that piece of hardware there? Yeah, that's called the orb. It is what, it's now called World. It used to be WorldCoin when it first came out. It's their solution. World, by the way, co-founded by Sam Altman. Why did Sam Altman co-found that back in 2022? Because as he was driving this, massive uptake of AI, he knew that if we all didn't solve the problem of proof of personhood, it was going to cripple his industry and potentially even destroy it because of all the cybersecurity nightmares that it would create. So he has co-founded a company to do it, and they studied and said, well, if we can just come up with a reasonably privacy-respecting way of taking everyone in the world's biometric eye scan and putting a hash of that in a Merkle tree on a blockchain that they also run, and tie that to a cryptocurrency that they also have, that would be a solution that the whole world should embrace. Well, I'm not going to, and by the way, they also, at this point, have raised over $250 million to develop and promote that solution. Well, there were a number of us in the decentralized identity space that said, whoa, that is not the way to go to solve this. To turn what really needs to become a global digital utility into something that's run by a private company with an associated blockchain and cryptocurrency, that's not the future that we want. So when Jim challenged us to go after this, I've been doing research on this at Gen, and when WorldCoin first launched in 2023, Vitalik Buterin wrote this wonderful essay called, What Do I Think of Biometric Proof of Personhood? They came to him, World came to him and said, Vitalik, the Ethereum ecosystem needs proof of personhood. You've got many projects out there, DAOs, blockchains where you want to protect voting rights just for people. You need this. We think we've got a good solution. Will you evaluate it? And if you like it, tell the world. Well, in this paper, which is easy to find out there, just put in his name and proof of personhood, it concludes with this table. And the far right column is what WorldCoin is, a specialized hardware biometric solution. And as you can see, to his 4 criteria, it ranks fairly well for privacy, which I think is a little strange, but that's where he did it. But it's not decentralized in his view. The security against fake people is only medium, as well as accessibility and scalability, partially because of the blockchain piece. He said it's better than general hardware biometric, which has very low security, but his preferred solution is that first column. He called it the social graph-based approach because it's the highest security against fake, it's fairly high decentralization. But the 2 areas that he said he didn't think it was, that needed solutions were privacy and the accessibility and scalability of the solution. So I was asked to review this paper by the president of Gen, and I came back and said, Vitalik is arriving at that conclusion because he's looking at it through a blockchain lens, which is natural for him. But if we look at that same problem space through decentralized identity lens using two W3C standards that have, a lot of work has gone into. DIDs, which are, I think, just coming to a 1.1, but verifiable credentials, the 2.0 specification is now approved. If we take those tools and go back to this problem, we can actually solve it very elegantly with what we call a decentralized trust graph. Now we've reached the interactive portion of this presentation. I want everyone to leave this room with a clear picture in your mind. What do we mean by a decentralized trust graph? Will everyone who has a smartphone take it out of their pocket and hold it up in the air? I'm not seeing very many smartphones in the air. Yeah, I'd be amazed if someone in this room does not have a smartphone. Okay, now, keep it in the air if on your smartphone you have an address for someone else at this conference. Yeah, all the smartphones are staying in the air because we all know someone else at this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a decentralized trust graph. It doesn't exist in any one place. It exists on all of our phones. It happens to exist in our mobile address books, which means we can't prove it to anyone else. We know it ourselves. But if we capture that graph and put it in your mobile wallet using DIDs and decentralized and verifiable credentials, now we have a cryptographically verifiable decentralized trust graph. Okay? That's what we're doing here. And so my analysis went back to the president of Gen and said, hey, if we do this and we take this approach, and I want to make sure all four of these things are clear. Yes, of course it's going to be very high security, right? There's no stronger proof you can get of another person than you meet him in person. That's why it's called the first person project, right? It's highly decentralized, as we just talked about, because it's spread in all the mobile wallets, and all the communities you're part of have their own enterprise wallets, okay? Every person in the world that's connected in any way to any social graph can be part of it. Even if you don't have a device, you can be represented by a cloud wallet, okay, as long as you trust that guardian or of that wallet. And most of all, it is highly private for the same reason that your mobile address book on your phone is yours. You decide who to share it with, okay? If someone asks you, hey, can you show me your whole mobile address book? Right there, you go, what's my trust relationship with you, right? It's actually fairly easy to share that data. It's all in structured data form. But how easily does anyone these days click upload your mobile address book, right? We all know to watch that. So we felt that this solution to proof of personhood was actually a solution to decentralized trust on the internet, on the web, and then we gradually, I'm pointing to Wenjing over there, one of the folks you're going to hear from later today, who I want to acknowledge was the first one at Trust over IP to start waving the flag going, AI is important, we should be thinking about trust for AI. That was like 4 years ago, and now everyone goes, yeah, he was right. Okay, so how do we build this trust graph? I'm next going to quickly explain these two credentials we need, personhood credentials and verifiable relationship credentials. They're not actually very complicated. They're quite beautiful and elegant and powerful, but at the heart, it's a simple solution that we can build out on. So we'll start with personhood credentials. What really gave this a huge kickstart was a paper that came out in August of last year of that name. This is just a snapshot, a little unusual because 32 authors of that paper, and you can see their affiliations there. And I'll point out something interesting. These two from OpenAI. So it caught everyone's eyes right away to go, wait a minute, OpenAI is promoting something that's not world, right? And apparently the ones that are highlighted in yellow there were all attended a workshop that DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Agency in the US, the US Department of Defense, their R&D arm is called DARPA, they had assigned a special team to research proof of personhood because they recognized that it could lead to a cybersecurity disaster in the US economy. And they had this workshop in February, and again, these folks were there, and Stephen Adler, the primary author of this paper, gave the keynote address. And several of us from the First Person Project went to say, hey, we want to learn, who else is thinking about this decentralized trust graph approach? The answer was no one else at the workshop until we talked about it, at which point Stephen Adler said, oh, keep going. I think you're going in the right direction. So I highly recommend the paper. I put the, if you're interested, you can also just put in personhood credentials in any browser, it'll come up. But I'm going to boil it down, all 63 pages boils down to just 2 requirements. First one is they're limited, the issuers of personhood credentials will issue 1 per person. If you lost the credential, if anything happens, they will reissue it, but only 1 per person, right? Now you stop and you think, well, where are we going to find issuers who do that? Well, every government in the world, every company in the world, every university in the world, every professional association in the world, there are lots of entities out there that have to keep track of the real people and make sure they have 1 account. For all the reasons, it's 1 person, 1 vote, 1 person, 1 job, whatever. So it's not a big burden to find these issuers, these personal credentials, if we can get the cycle going, okay? The second thing the paper points out, if you're going to have a standard credential that you could go to any website or app, any place, and instantly say, yep, I'm here, I'm a real person, I want, it's not, you don't need an account anymore, you just need a connection. You're connecting your wallet, your agent to that. It can't be tracking you, okay? This is exactly the same requirement that the EU decided about for the EU digital identity wallet. Unlinkability. If you're using credentials out of that wallet, especially the government-issued personal identity credential, the PID, it cannot be linked. And they've already concluded in the EU, there's a number of us, you're going to hear from Marcus Sabadello, who's very involved with that project in the next talk. They've already concluded the only way to do that is with ZKP. They haven't decided on the, it's a very complicated topic, but they know that they have to do that. Well, in the First Person Project, we said we have to have that. And I don't have time to go into it, but I'm happy to tell anyone in the audience, the CTO for LF Decentralized Trust, a fellow named Hart Montgomery, happens to specialize in ZKP. And he said, I think one of the best in the world, it's a professor, Dr. Sanjam Garg at the University of California, Berkeley. He got Dr. Garg and his team to agree to help us develop and lead the team developing the ZKP that we need. So I'll talk a little bit more about ZKP in a minute. So these credentials, personal credentials, PHCs for short, they are the anchors in the decentralized trust graph for proving you're a real person and you're unique. And here's a way to visualize that. In whatever ecosystem we're talking about, it could be a country, it could be a company, it could be a university, it could be an online community. As long as they know you're real and you're unique, they can issue you a personhood credential. You could argue that's enough to actually solve the proof of personhood problem. But, actually I need this point. If they're all going to be decentralized, if you're going to have thousands or even hundreds of thousands or millions of personhood credential issuers, how are you going to verify when someone wants to show that? You need what we call at Trust RP, a decentralized trust registry network. You need to be able to quickly, just like with DNS, resolve the name of a website. You need to be able to resolve the DID of the issuer, that company or government or whatever, and then verify the signature on that credential. You need to know that they are an authorized personhood credentials issuer, which is governance. Governance is the other half of this whole thing. That is the reason that the Ayra Association was founded in January. I'm one of the folks that worked on that. It's a Swiss association for governance of this network, just like in similar ways to ICANN governs DNS. So that's how we would deal with this. The first paper on personhood credentials was published by Ayra in January. So, as I was saying, they're very valuable, they're very useful, but don't give us the whole decentralized trust graph that we want. They only capture the relationship between the ecosystem and members of that ecosystem. We had meanwhile been doing work on what we long felt were the greatest contributors to trust, which is trust relationships, right? Now, we all have all kinds of them, and any relationship that you're directly part of is a first-person relationship. You know another person, you know a company, you know a government, you have a first-person relationship with them, okay? We said we need to be able to capture those. Now, when we talked to Jim Zemlin about the whole project, one of the things I have to say is he lit up because he'd read enough about it that he said, I know what this is like. See what you guys are doing. You guys are creating the virtual key signing party. How many folks in this room are old enough to remember PGP? Yeah, I see a couple hands going up. All right, there it is. Philippe says, yeah, I remember that stuff. The whole idea when Phil Zimmerman first came up with PGP was the way we're going to solve this key verification problem is we're going to have these parties and we're going to go around and verify each other's keys and then sign them. We're each going to sign each other's keys, okay? Well, when Jim came up with this, he actually used that analogy in his keynote address in the LF member summit in March. Dinway, you were there, right? And I was there in the front row and I was like, oh, that's really good. We have a 2-hour workshop tomorrow. I need to go create slides that show how that happens, okay? Now, I have an interactive version of this, but it was too complicated to bring it on for this. So I'm just going to walk you through this in 2 parts, okay? And this is important because this first part is the reason that when Wenjing talks to you about the trust spanning protocol this afternoon, pay attention, okay? So this is Alice and Bob, and these are each of their agents. We call them the agent wallets because we're putting everything in the context of agent-to-agent interaction, okay, whether it's on a local device or in the cloud. And the sequence, how many folks here, and literally hold up your phone again, if in this conference you've used a QR code to connect with somebody? Yeah, okay. Maybe half the phones in the room, right? It's very popular here in China. It's actually very popular around the world. It's just that depending on where you go, the network is different. Here, it tends to be WeChat, right? If you go to Bhutan, it's 100% WhatsApp. That's what they use over there. If you do it in the US, it's generally LinkedIn. If you're, privacy-savvy communities, we're using Signal. The point is, we all know that ceremony. So Alice, in step 1, shows Bob a QR code, just like she would on any other network. But Bob is going to scan it with a first-person enabled wallet, any digital wallet that says, I'm going to support these standards. And Bob says, yeah, I want to have this relationship. His wallet will generate a key pair if it's not already got a whole set that's been pre-generated. And the associated DID document. Marcus is going to tell you all about DID documents and how they fit into all this. And send it right back to Alice. Alice is going to check a nonce in that to make sure it came from her QR code, and then she's going to do the same thing for Bob. They have just exchanged pairwise private DIDs and created what we call the personal private channel between their 2 wallets and their 2 agents that they can use for anything that they need to communicate about forever. There's no intermediary in that relationship, okay? There's no LinkedIn, there's no Facebook, and they can communicate end-to-end from any device they have, okay? Keep this in mind when Wenjing, because, well, what protocol are you going to use for that exchange? We've been building one at Trust over IP for the last, well, 2 years specifically, but 5-year history, and Wenjing's going to tell you about it, the trust spanning protocol, okay? So that's part 1, what we've now set up with that relationship. Now I'm going to switch to the second diagram. So that part 1 is all the stuff up in pink. Now we're going to exchange the verifiable relationship credentials. So once Alice's DID doc is received back here, and Bob verifies that, he then, his wallet will create this verifiable relationship credential. It's really simple. It's the pair of DIDs, date stamp, and Bob signs it with his private key, okay? Now there's one more thing here that I'll talk about more in a minute, personas, which is really important, but that's the essence of a verifiable relational credential. There are other things that can become part of it. And we'll talk about how we're going to standardize that, but that's the essence of it. And once he's done that and signed it, he issues it back to Alice, and of course, he's got all the information in her DID doc about how to do that. Alice's agent receives that, verifies Bob's signature against his DID doc, and then she does the same thing and issues her verifiable relational credential back to Bob. It's not really very complicated. It's just taking the principles we've had of DIDs and verifiable credentials and taking them out of the institution to individual context and saying, we can do this peer-to-peer. All right? Now, I'm just going to point out, if Alice and Bob are two clever attackers and they want to create a Sybil attack and make it look like they have a lot of relationships, it's trivial to spin up 1,000 bots and have them all exchange verifiable relational credentials, right? This is only part of the equation, and you put it together with the other part of the equation. Oh, first I'm going to talk about one more thing that I'm going to go back here. Okay, so now we've exchanged verifiable relational credentials. But there's one more thing that needs to happen here to complete what we call the ceremony. And this is important, and I especially, when I was here last year speaking at this conference, I learned this part of the ceremony, which is when you connect with someone on WeChat, and because I unfortunately don't speak Chinese, I really appreciate that whoever I've done the QR code with then sends me like their name, sometimes their email address, just other information so I know who it's connected with, right? That's because WeChat doesn't natively do the next thing I'm about to describe, which is once this is set up and you have your personal channel, Alice and Bob can exchange R cards. Stands for relationship cards. It's a business card like anything else. I understand they're apps you use here in China with WeChat, but they only work if you're exchanging on the right app. And do they work on the rest of the world? What we're proposing with our cards is this will work everywhere. It will be as ubiquitous as something like email. And here's a very simple description. Because it is simply a digitally signed object, the way we're actually working on designing the ceremony is right when Bob first clicks OK, he actually selects the R card or R cards that he wants to share with Alice. So not only does this go across, but then his agent will send the R cards, which are also digitally signed. And they can consist of anything. We're going to be, again, I'm going to talk about how we're going to be standardizing that so that it's universally recognized. But imagine now that all the networks you're on that Bob wants to connect with Alice on, WeChat and Signal and WhatsApp and whatever the latest social network is, micro network they might be part of, those can all be there and all be exchanged. And this is a live connection. Bob changes his network, he changes his email address, he adds a new network. He wants to share his birthday. All he has to do is make that change, and his agent will send a signed message, TSP message, over. Alice doesn't have to worry about it. Her agent will verify it. It's a secure private data sharing channel. Does that make sense? All right. I know I'm probably running tight for time. How am I doing for time? Okay, good. I have two more things to cover. Now we're going to talk about the essential role of zero-knowledge proofs in this infrastructure. As I said earlier, it is the other major requirement that was in the personhood credential paper. But ZKPs, for anyone who's been around them for long, they're a complex animal, okay? And in particular, there is a verifiable credential format that's in use today. British Columbia government in Canada, it is the standard credential format they use. It is a project, and it's been standardized in Hyperledger now, LF Decentralized Trust, called a non-creds. A non-creds, unfortunately, can't make proofs about other ZKP proofs. And what we need to be able to do is make proofs about both the personhood credentials and the verifiable relationship credentials you have. And that is this, what we call the verifiable relationship trust triangle. I was pointing out earlier, Bob and Alice, if they're attackers, could create 1,000 fake relationships between each other. But if the proof you need is, oh, they both have personhood credentials in the same ecosystem, then you can prove they have just one relationship in that ecosystem. Maybe they're connected in other ecosystems, but in fact, if they are, that's more proof that those are real relationships. So what you need is proofs of this trust triangle. And the three key proofs that we're after, that we're designing the ZKP to be able to prove, I have at least X, because you don't have to name a specific number. The verifier just needs to know, do you have one person registered? Do you have more than three, right? Because you don't want your response to give away, to be triangulated. In one ecosystem, I have at least Y number of verifiable relationships. Or the most powerful one, across all my ecosystems, I have this number of verifiable relationships. As we start to build up, just think how many people you know and met in person at this one conference. That's how strong the trust can get, that you are a real and unique person. All right. We're already getting questions from folks, including the Linux Foundation, saying, well, if you have ZKP, what if you have other credentials where you really actually need to prove something like your age, or that you're over a certain age, your citizenship, professional qualifications, and of course, EKYC, know your customer for that. And the answer is, well, in fact, the ZKP will work for all those credentials as long as they're issued to be able to work with this. So we think this is a bottoms-up driver for interoperability of verifiable credentials, which has been a real problem in adoption. All right, my last point here, we can finally tie this into AI and what widely is called authenticated delegation to your AI agent. There's several good papers out there, by the way, with names close to that. And this is how do you use your trust graph to prove you control a personal AI agent. And we'd like to suggest there's a very simple answer. You have a verifiable relationship with your personal AI agent, just like you would with another person. And I didn't change a single thing in this diagram other than the DID you're connecting to is the AI agent DID, and the verifiable credential exchange is with the agent, okay? And of course, you may have a whole army of agents working for you, but it's one click, one connection to have with all of them. They even can have personas. The same agent can be doing acting in different contexts for you, and replying back with, I'm in this persona. I'm your travel agent now, I'm your flight booking agent now, right? I'm your insurance agent, if they choose to. So, last thing I want to point out is, there's a bunch of advantages to taking this approach, okay? The first one, of course, is the agent can present its own proof of its relationship with Alice, right? It can actually prove to someone else. I'm representing Alice. Even better, it can present proofs from Alice that she's a real person and her trust graph. She can prove she's a trusted entity in the whole thing. The third one, and again, I'm going to highlight trust spanning protocol. Now she and her agent have a personal private channel for all the communications they need to do. And that every single message is signed. And so you have this great auditable trail of all of that, which also means Alice can take actions with her agent. She can sign things, she can give verifiable authorizations to that agent to control what it's doing, and she can get verifiable responses back. It's all in the power of the channel. All right, so I'll wrap up simply by saying, we think first-person credentials, first-person agents are a match made in heaven. That's why we're here in this talk. If we do this all with open standards, which is the plan, and they may potentially end up at W3C, we're starting them at Trust RP and Diff, but that's the whole thing. This can work for everyone everywhere, right? There's nothing proprietary and nothing that's specific to any particular AI methodology, or it's just a universal. And most importantly, this is how people can be first-class actors, fully empowered and represented in an AI economy. Now, I keep mentioning standardization. A blog post is going up later this week about, there are actually 3 new working groups, but the one I want to point out to you, Decentralized Trust Graph Working Group. It's jointly sponsored by Trust RP and Diff at the Linux Foundation. And those are just the QR codes for membership in either one of those. There is a free membership option in both of them, by the way. And I'll let anyone, the kickoff meetings are in about 10 days. And we welcome you to be part of that group. And of course, you know, it's building on W3C standards. Eventually, when we get to those things, they may well go to W3C to keep building out its suite, which means I have one last challenge for everyone here, just like Jim Zemlin. GOSIM 2026, we should all be using first-person credentials and first-person relationships. And we're assembling a set of companies. I'm looking at it in a way. We're assembling a set of companies to actually deliver on that. So get ready. Bring your phones. That's it.
感谢 Drummond 先生为人工智能时代带来的新的身份和信任机制的解决方案。我在想大家有没有什么问题可以提出来？我们大概可以有1-2个问题。So first we should thank Mr. Drummond about your solutions to the AI words regarding the identity and the trust. So I just want if you have any questions. So we get one from. Anybody can get a mic? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very interesting topic. And my question is, from your perspective, what's your definition of trust in AI agent scenario? And the second is how you can guarantee, using the graph, guarantee the trust. Thank you.
It's an extremely good question. I'm going to give you a very architectural answer. Trust is layered. And the bottom layer when we're talking about trust online is the cryptographic layer, where you can actually verify the identifier and the authenticity of your communications with the other party, which includes with an agent. Okay? So it's person to person, person to company, business, person to agent, person to device. That's the cryptographic layer of trust. Above that come the human layers. What do I need to know about that other party or other entity in order, and that is, and we have a design principles of the Trust RP stack. One of those principles is contextual. It's very contextual, right? If I just need to, you know, buy you a coffee, it's a much different thing than if I'm selling you a $10 million painting and you want credit. So the human elements of trust we build up, and I think we can do that in many cases with verifiable credentials. That's exactly what we're doing here. But you also can then extend it to other dimensions, such as how long has our relationship been on? How many other parties do you know that I know, right? And as those build up, whatever the context is, I can make the decision. The trust decision always lies in the hands of the verifier, right? Whoever's entering the relationship. I always make the decision in the end. You make the decision in the end. I don't know if that helps, but it's an extremely hard question.
We got another question.
Actually, I have a very quick question in terms of the personal identity and the trust that you build in your network. How do you comply with the compliance and rules and regulations? Is there any standard that you have to meet? Thank you.
So I can answer that by differentiating between proof of personhood and other things that you may need to prove, as I mentioned in one of my slides. So if it's a matter of proof of personhood, the verifier, the site that's asking you for that proof, they will decide what that level is. We're not going to turn around and say, if you have 3 personal credentials and 7 verifiable relational credentials, you're good. That's up to the verifier. So what we're doing is we're defining the 2 standard types of credentials, and you can ask for whatever thresholds you need to establish enough trust. But that's only proof of personhood, proof of uniqueness. Then, if, for instance, you want to apply for a bank loan or open a bank account, they're going to need other information. And They're going to be able to use ZKP to ask for only what they need, but they're still going to need to know other things. And that depends on that relationship. If it's proof of age for certain websites, if it's banking information, other credentials for which you have attributes, and they've been issued by trust verifiers, you're going to be able to provide proofs for. So we're saying standardize how we do proof of personhood, and then extend to what other different contextual situations will require. And that means compliance. Even KYC, I don't know how many folks are familiar with Know Your Customer requirements. It's not universal at all. It's extremely specific, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, even changes within countries, depending on what kind of financial relationship you want to have. So you have to adapt to that.
So great, thank you, Drummond.